The usual lady. Right, well, as you can see, I'm very conventional. I thought I'd put on a tweed suit and a bow tie for this evening, but I compromised with a tweed jacket. And I think I'm here as a kind of Aunt Sally for the wild-eyed romantics that are going to follow me. But we'll see how we get on. It's a view, of course, not every economist's view. And I'm not sure how many economists would agree that they are conventional or not, but we must proceed. I skipped Economics 101, which is on a slide I took out, and I just went straight to Brundtland. You'll all be familiar with this. A problem an economist would have with this well-known definition is that the words needs and ability. Economists don't really believe in needs. We believe in demand, which varies according to other demands, according to price, of course, if you're buying the stuff. We would, who defines needs? Also, ability, of course, is a pretty nebulous word when you get down to it. Do we mean ability? Well, we must mean future ability. So in a way, we don't know what it is or will be. And in any case, how do people exploit their ability to do this, that, or the other? You'll also be familiar with the three dimensions of sustainability, but I think I've even got a fancy diagram in a minute. Environmental, socio-economic. By economic, I think we could just say financial. It depends what level we're talking about. Level of a household or a firm, we probably do mean financial. Or some people, of course, prefer the term governance, which is a bit wider, hence the ESG. And the people who feel or experience these three pillars of sustainability would be what economists would call agents, either firms, could be commercial, co-ops, clubs, as well as households. And then our old friends, the governments, both when they're dealing with things inside their borders and, of course, internationally. Yes, here's a nice diagram. People like diagrams. I'm afraid I don't. I prefer equations and definitions, but and the diagrams are always symmetric. Have you noticed that? I've never seen a diagram yet that wasn't symmetric. This one's a bit more complicated, but it's a nice Venn diagram, I thought, rather than them all piling into a single sustainability at the core, which is pretty small in this diagram. You've got the other three intersections, which I don't know who these guys were, but talking about equity, which is very important. I haven't got into that at all today. Bearability, tolerance, I suppose, and viability. Well, another big topic. So going beyond that, I've spared you Economics 101, but obviously the terms we use, resources, processes, consuming, investing, trade, goods and services. Services very important for the UK economy, for example, much more important than goods. And even Donald Trump seems to ignore services, plenty of tariffs on goods, but he just ignores services. It's just as well for Britain, really, since we sell a lot of services to them. Redistribution, either of income through tax or wealth, not through tax, for complicated reasons. And of course, the rules we live by: law, regulation, culture, and technology. And then by policy, economists tend to divide it into money, tax, subsidies, regulation, which of course involves all sorts of things like monitoring and inspection and penalties and enforcement. And a third area, of course, is exhortation, educating people, persuading them. You'll be very familiar with that. This is part of it, I suppose. Okay, I thought I'd just jump to some of the problems of non-sustainability, I suppose. And I thought I'd put up a few cheerful messages here. England, at least, or London, was going to run out of timber in 15 something or other. And I told her at least 30 bills going into Parliament, and this is the first Elizabethan time, as to how to prevent this, the country running out of timber. And Scotland, of course, has had its own episodes of deforestation, and so apparently did Japan, about which I know very little. And yet, we still seem to have quite a lot of trees, if not timber, which is, of course, a rather more special kind of wood. And of course, food, you'll all be familiar with Malthus, who thought we'd all be, most of us would be starving by whenever, in the middle of the 19th century. Hasn't happened. Manure, again, quite a well-known quotation. How on earth were we going to survive when there were far too many horses in London? Smoke, air pollution, again, we seem to have fought our way through that, although was responsible for a lot of deaths, both health and accidents in the 1930s, 40s, and early 50s. Economists looked into all this, of course, and quite a famous economist, Kuznets, looked into it with a diagram which showed, or rather, he was an argument which showed that with development, one would indeed get more pollution, degradation, exploitation, but then after a certain point, one would get less. I think I may have a curve here. So as one moves across the diagram, per capita incomes go up, and population too, I suppose. Then environmental degradation, pollution, resource exploitation, using up resources would go up, and then at some point, carefully undefined in this diagram, it would go down again. Problem is, of course, there are lots of different forms of degradation. Are we talking about carbon or air pollution or utilizing resources? I just happened to trip over the Economist yesterday, actually. You'll all have read the Economist last weekend. China's carbon emissions may have peaked. So China, which of course is a major, well, the major carbon emitter these days, may be at the top of that curve and going down again. And if that's true, then of course there's some hope there. A few more, I have to admit there are some negatives, which is probably what the sort of thing has brought you along here tonight. Desertification, quite a big one over many parts of the world, and deforestation ongoing, if not worse, in South America, etc. And the problem here are not only domestic, but trying to get international agreement and collaboration, which is into the policy area. I was asked to suggest things that one might do, you might do, I might do, we might do. I've noticed, and it's in the title of this talk, it's our economy and how we make it sustainable. I'm never quite sure who they mean by we and our in that context. Is it the northeast of Scotland or the UK or Europe or the world? However, I won't dwell on that. The sort of things economists, I think, would argue is do trade, don't go down the Trump route of local, even or protectionism and even localism. Buying locally is fine if you want to do it and you've got social reasons, but really trading, transport is becoming more and more efficient. Cheaper and cheaper, I suppose, in a way. Okay, flowers from Kenya are probably not terribly good in terms of carbon output, but you're depriving some poor guy on the other side of the world of a livelihood if you stop buying vegetables or fruit from poor developing countries. Don't focus on minor problems. Take a look at the overall problem and try and pick the bit that you can we can make a big change to. And don't just say change. I think the current Labour government got into power last year by saying we shall have change, but what the change is, nobody's very clear. Do emphasize data. I mean, economists are quite keen on data. All right, it's fuzzy in ways, something very hard to measure, but without that, we're really trading words with each other, and it's quite hard to make progress. I'm quite keen on regulation. Admittedly, it's got flaws, but I think people do understand the need for limits on this, that, or the other, and will accept them up to a point. That's probably not a bad route to go down. On the other hand, economic tools, taxes, subsidies are quite powerful, especially in the longer run. It's got sugar out of our drinks quite effectively in the last 5 years. Taxing fuel is a good idea, even though the government refuses to put up the tax on fuel, and some subsidies especially for technologies that are coming on stream has worked quite well in the past. The big ones to me in terms of of sustainability in our situation in Britain, I suppose, would be insulate, because energy obviously is a major problem for this country, and we are just grossly under insulated, both ourselves and at your houses. Meat consumption, and coming from agriculture, I'm a bit sensitive about this, of course, but clearly some forms of meat are pretty inefficient and ineffective, and take an awful lot of land, both for the animals themselves, and of course an awful lot of grain, probably more than half the grain used to feed animals. So I mean, in a way, that's food security. If we ever got into a really difficult situation, all we do is slaughter the animals and eat the grain ourselves. That's a bit of a drastic step. And of course, obviously, don't fly and don't drive, or at least much less than you were doing at present. Thank you very much.